the calories that you do consume when you are taking GLP, it's incredibly important, the quality of those calories, because you can have, like I said,
Yes.
some days you're having 1,000 calories.
Mhm.
We've got avocados, olive oil, I mean, full of calories, but the right calories. So I think you mentioned a really good point, that Lumen, on a journey where you are also taking GLP-1 medication, going to teach you how to consume the calories that are right for you. That, the muscle mass that you say you've managed to maintain, it's probably down to the fact that you're eating the right amount of protein. Like your Lumen is recommending the protein, and
Hands
protein is
down.
so important, especially if you're taking a medication like GLP-1, because you don't want to lose that muscle. Sharon, thank you so much for joining me today on this
Yeah.
conversation about GLP-1 and Lumen, or Ozempic, as many people know it by. So it's a class of drugs it's just being spoken about so much right now, and a lot of us don't really understand it. We don't understand. Well, I think a lot of people don't know like what or how to eat while taking GLP-1. So Sharon, before I ask the first question, just tell us a bit about you. When did you join us here at Lumen, as a member, and what you do in life?
So thank you so much for all of that, and for heading this up, because it's such a big deal. This tool is so incredible, such a blessing to the inside of what's happening. And the fact that the science is available to everybody at the price point is even better. So just thank you from me to you for heading this up and being who you are. So I am from Vermont in the United States, and I have been with Lumen since April 7th, I think, is my very first date. If I were to go back into my app, that was the first day I got my stuff and started my journey. And I've been a lifelong health nut. Health is very important to me, and it has been since I was a little girl. And I became super obsessed with it in the 80s, specifically because I was coming in, into puberty and becoming a teenager in ninth grade, going into my high school time. And it became super important to me because the people in my life were not super healthy with the things that they ate. And I saw the discrepancy of the life I wanted and the life that they had. And that did lead me down some not so great paths with body, distortions and food deprivation. In fact, that became my drug of choice, was deprivation. Deprive yourself of all the things. And so I think that's one of the things that I really love about Lumen, is that which you cannot get, by the way, from using a monitor on your arm for just glucose. You're never going to get the profile that you will with Lumen. And that was what was so fascinating, because people don't understand macros. They don't understand carb cycling. They don't understand the importance of fat, all the things that go together in macro eating. And macro eating is very hard to calculate, which again is so amazing, because this beautiful unit and the app really brings that whole world together. So there's a learning curve. So my background also is I'm an educator by trade, but then I flipped that, and I'm a mother of 5 children, and I was the one that was taking juice boxes away from their kids. I've got a 15 to 28 years old in part of our family. And the older kids are kind of like, oh, you kind of kept that stuff under lock and key. And there's a fine balance for that. It wasn't out of obsession. It was out of budget. I can't let you just eat whatever you want, because when I have to make a meal, I have to have the food. Right. And so there's been some ebb and flow. And I think that many parents go through this with their children as they're coming of age and out on their own. And because I was a depriver by nature, I didn't deprive it. My kids weren't eating carob chips and plantain chips. They were getting all the things that everyone else gets, but it was just in moderation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's key.
Yeah, right. It is key. And
maybe that balance as a child and as an adult.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And you do find pretty soon where that doesn't serve you. Right. And so then that led me into becoming a health coach. And I'm also an essential oil expert. That's my actual profession. I actually do that over everything else, and everything just kind of blends together because it all goes together
Yes, it
so
does.
incredibly well for that healthy lifestyle. So that's what I do. And in my other life, other than being the mother of 5 children, which is my greatest joy.
Wow. So you've been with Lumen just under a year. Now,
Mm-hmm.
you mentioned a few of these challenges that you had before Lumen, growing up
Mm,
with food, like your relationship with food, turning to deprivation as a way to manage your weight.
yeah.
What sort of key challenges did you find Lumen helped you overcome these past few months
Oh, I
with
love that you
food
asked that question.
like food and actually overall, right? Like you said, everything comes together. We need to look at health from a holistic viewpoint. So, did Lumen help in all those areas in your life?
Actually, yeah, it did. It did help me with that. And here's why. When you're a depriver and you are thinking less is always more, that is the addiction, right? That becomes the addiction. And no one wants to be overweight. No, everybody really at the end of the day wants to be able to live a happy life. They want to be free. They want to move. They want to participate. And when the body does get so overburdened by lifestyle choices, food choices, even if they're eating very little, it's just the wrong amounts without the right amount of movement. And then you start getting that emotional component. So I'm really grateful you used the word holistic, because life is holistic. We should
Yeah.
look at every part of our lives as holistic. And as a holistic health coach, that is one of those beauty marks that I am very fond of. So for me, I was a depriver. And because I was a depriver, and because I was always at war with my body, and I had to beat my body into, the more I exercise, the less I eat. So it's taken on everything from, starvation, which worked for me as a teenager. And then when I realized, oh gosh, I'm going to die if I keep this up, not because I was hospitalized, it was just a thought that came to my mind because of the lifestyle that I led. And I listened to those thoughts, and I knew that wasn't by accident that thought came to my mind. When my mother passed away when I was 20 years old, I turned to, control, right? Control. So it became being very strict about what time I woke up, what I was doing first, exercise to control my stress. But you don't know that you're doing abusive things, like, because you're just doing it out of sheer survival so
Yep.
often, right? And then I realized, oh, this isn't healthy for me. And I got myself into counseling, and I started getting migraines. So I was like, okay, all of this is, again, that holistic piece. I started piecing it together, and I got myself some help. And so overcome that. And then on comes the weight, right? Because there's this, now the body is like, I just need to protect myself because you are not going to protect me.
Yeah.
Right. So the weight is there to protect. Like, I don't know if I'm going to eat tomorrow because you went weeks without eating, before, or you over exercised, and I'm just afraid of you.
Yeah, scared. Scared and
Right.
stressed. Yeah.
I know. And so that's the next phase I went into. And then I got married, and then about 4 months after in July, so 7 months after we were married, we got pregnant with our first baby. And at 25, I found myself being very, very conscientious of this new life that I was creating. And that became my focus of eating all the right things in the right quantities, not going over my weight allowance with my doctor, and all those things, right? And then once she was born, it was tending to her and making sure that my nutrients were good so I could supply enough milk and all the things. So that enter motherhood, right? And to 3 children in 4 years, it was very
Wow.
quick, back to back to back. And that was my life. And I I'll tell you that third pregnancy just about undid me, because I put on I literally gained probably 50 pounds that wouldn't go away. And that put me at that 200 mark. And it was devastating, because you're talking about someone who really cares about her health and wasn't, now my body is totally, now I'm at war with my body, because the body is the problem. Right. In my mind, in my sick mind, my body was the problem. So it was deprivation, all the things to try to beat it into submission. And it just didn't work. It's like, listen, I'm clever. I'm so clever. I'm going to outsmart you every single time, because I need to breathe and I need to function. And I've got these organs to keep moving. So you're going to lose. And I didn't know that then, but so let's fast forward to 3 years ago. 3 years ago in January, my son was finding himself in an emotional eating battle. Like, he would eat emotionally to support himself. And he was like, I really want to lose weight. And he said, we need to find an eating plan. And all of a sudden I got scared and I started to cry. And I knew I was back into an eating disorder, because I didn't want to be told what to eat. I didn't want to be accountable for what I wasn't eating. And I was still in this cycle of up and down, right? With intermittent fasting. And it wasn't working in my favor. After I took off 25 pounds of my 50, now it was, actually 80 pounds that I needed to lose. And so I put myself on my blood pressure was crazy. Anybody who's been in this situation knows your blood pressure goes up. They're saying that you're, insulin resistant, and that you have PCOS for women. That was always testing negative. And then they just have you on a diabetic plan, pushing you into diabetes. And I knew as a health coach that was where they intended to put me. And I was like, that is not my story.
And what
it's not my story,
right? Because all the cluster of conditions, which we know now, is metabolic syndrome. That's what you had.
Absolutely. And no one talks about metabolic syndrome. And that is what the topic should be about. What is metabolic syndrome? Because it becomes the label of autoimmune. And it's actually metabolic syndrome. It's the body doesn't know what to do. And therefore we don't know what to do to take it. And then they're dumping a bunch of drugs on it rather than actually getting to the root. And it is a syndrome.
So for anyone who doesn't know what it is, it's like you mentioned, you had a number of symptoms, and it all put together. So it's the high blood pressure, it's the high cholesterol, it's the excess belly fat, it's the insulin resistance, it's the fatigue, it's all these things put together, and then you're faced with metabolic syndrome, which a lot of people have today, and they don't realize that they've got it, and they've been heavily medicated,
heavily.
And basically, it's the cure or prevention is fixing and strengthening your metabolic health. It's focusing on that, which I guess that's where you started, right? I mean,
I did.
You had that knowledge, you knew what was going on in your body.
Yes. Yeah. But I didn't understand that it actually was metabolic syndrome. It wasn't until I got to Lumen when the GLP-1s started hitting the market, right? Like, there was talk of this 3 years ago, and I was looking for a solution. And Lumen was not on my radar. And so I was looking at these GLP, not necessarily drugs, but monitoring devices and other things that were in the GLP-1 market, right?
Yeah.
And trying to unwind it as a health coach professional, going, what are they doing? What are they looking for? Where is the formula? Right? That was where my scientific mind was going, and my strategic mind, because intermittent fasting was not the only answer. It wasn't. And that's what everybody was trying to push. The belly fat was a problem. I was just absolutely blown away. Like, and plus I was also at the age, well, this is just your age. I'm like, okay, we've got hormones. The endocrinologists are not actually looking at the hormone levels, and hormones absolutely play 100% of a role specific to women's health, maybe to men's, but I'm a woman and this is where I reign. But it is hormonally driven for women. And I didn't have high cholesterol, and I had loads of energy. So the endocrinologists were baffled and the doctors were baffled. I had one GP, general practitioner, who said to me, do not listen to them and do not go back to the endocrinologist. He said, your androgens are high. You know, I get breakouts on my hand. I have actually just for this interview, I had a little breakout where the androgens go too high in my body, and it results.
Wow.
And when stress is also present, what, you know, it's that cute little balance of enough sleep, the right nutrition, you know, all the things to just keep that homeostasis going. And if it goes out of whack, this is my body's reaction.
And
But
that's
we
pretty cool.
all,
What body's showing you, right? It's giving
well,
you the
a little
signs.
bit.
That's, I mean, it's terrible, but at the same time, it's like, it's also beautiful that you know, it's showing you, it's giving you a sign.
I think we get signs though. I think if everybody who's suffering from anything like this, maybe it's a rash on the skin anywhere, maybe it's an intolerance to something,
Yeah.
maybe it's hot flashes when you're not really in menopause, but you're kind of like, I don't understand it. Maybe it's the fatigue. You know, like there's lots of things. If we just look at the body and our experience holistically, and we start taking notes, because so many people are resistant to tracking.
Yeah.
And that's why people don't like Lumen. I'm like, listen, you've got to get good at tracking, because that's the only way you're going to, one, become friends with your body. Two, you're going to understand what works for you and what doesn't work for you.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's this, it's a very fine balance. So going back, I had to put myself into a refeeding program. And that's what I did. I put myself into a refeeding program to actually get my body to start. And that took care of the blood pressure in 2 seconds. Literally within 2 weeks of being on that, I wasn't finding, you know, that out of breath feeling and that my heart racing. That went away in 2 weeks of refeeding, just with that. And that's when I knew, okay, I'm not stupid. I know my body really is my friend. And then I started into the self-love piece of really nurturing my body and dry brushing and taking time to put lotion on every single part of my body and say how much I loved it and how grateful I was that I was alive and that I was healthy and all the things, right?
It's such an important component, right? That self-love and self-care. I'm so glad you
Mm-hmm.
mentioned that now. We don't do enough of that.
No, not at all. I don't care if you're the ideal weight or not. We're probably not doing enough of that at all. And so that was the beginning of it. And so immediately through that refeeding program and then getting into those pieces of training my body to eat every 2 hours in small increments, I was able to get the first 25 pounds off. And then I was stuck. I kind of would fluctuate. And that's where Lumen entered 3 years later. Like legit, it took me 25 pounds to just get to that year mark last year, where I've been with you guys now for a year almost. And then that's when things started to hum. But it was still up and down, right? And I was hovering at that 200 mark, and I was just like, blessed be, like, oh my gosh, like I've got to get, and then it was 190. And what I've noticed is that as I've come down in that weight, it's 10 pound increments. And then I hover. And I'm like, and that's where exercise becomes really important, to just the consistent, not heavy, but just getting out and walking every single day.
Just getting those steps in.
So, but that is key. And it's key to being on Ozempic, which for me is semaglutide. Semaglutide is the actual umbrella. Ozempic is a piece of it. And then there's 100 other different names that go with it. But for me, that has been key, is the movement piece. And it's critical, and calorie count. But all of that can be done from that beautiful app and tracking. And that's,
have you found then with your macros, for example, your protein, fat, and your carbs, the tracking them on with the Lumen app and also following the recommendations, have you felt like improvement in energy, or do you sleep better, or do you feel like you're gaining muscle easier? Like, what have you learned from using, like, tracking your steps, for example, and inputting them in the Lumen? Like, what pieces of the puzzle came together for you with the exercise and the nutrition with Lumen? Just out of interest.
Yeah, no, I think it's important to ask this question, because you don't know what's going on in the body. Muscle improvement. My chiropractor is amazed. She's like, oh, When she puts her hands on me, every time she's like, oh my gosh, like feel this muscle. Oh my gosh. She's just, and I'm not lifting weights, although I could, but it's not where I want to be right now. Right now, I am so concentrated on let's get this weight off. Let's keep moving.
Right.
And there's a delicate balance because even on this, it's, you could go crazy on a GLP-1, right? And do a lot of exercise. But then if you're not getting the calorie count in that you need, it's a very fine balance. So for me, I've focused on general movement and not crazy cardio because that actually sends me backwards. It actually makes me personally increase my weight. And I'm not in it for that. And so I just have learned that this is it. But I also know that that movement is also creating some muscle structure. The yoga that I do also creates muscle structure. And so I think when I'm hitting those 10-pound marks, when I'm going down, there's a couple of things at play. I think that there is muscle exchange, right?
Yeah.
Energy for exchange in muscle mass, because if my chiropractor is noticing the muscle, then it's actually there because I'm not paying attention to that piece. I'm not. I am literally like laser focused on let's get this weight off, let's keep moving, and let me just focus on what I'm eating because that's a critical piece for this. So what I found is when you are taking a GLP, Ozempic, or any of its off-brand semaglutide, it doesn't matter what the brand is, you have to treat yourself like you are a gastric bypass client. You really do. Because your caloric intake really is between 3 and 5.
Wow.
And that is absolutely not something that anyone is teaching you. And I've had other people try to kind of recruit me into, will you take my GLP-1? Will you, that's what they're coming to me for. And I'm like, no, I'm staying right where I'm at. I'm not trying anything extra because the other part to this is because it's not necessarily regulated. And in the United States, there are these little places that are popping up, these pop-ups, who are offering this in absolute exorbitant amounts of money because it's not something you can get on insurance right now. So you have to be very careful with whom you're working with.
Wow.
And because oftentimes they're finding that they're giving placebos and they're charging money and they give just a little bit and then they on and off and they've got you kind of in this cycle to keep you on it. And that's a lot of what people are worried about. Like once it comes off, do I have to stay on a GLP-1 forever? Okay. Well, I'm still 30 pounds to my goal. So I've taken 50 pounds off and I'm 35 pounds to where I really want to be. That is where I feel the best. That's where I function the best. All the things for myself. And I know that by treating my eating plan as though I am a gastric bypass client, that keeping that macro count and carb count specifically, if you bulk up on carbs and you are not eating vegetables, as an example, which is so prime, people who have gastric bypass surgery often cannot ever process vegetables ever again. They can't in raw form. They can have it in drink. They can have it freeze dried into a drink, right? They can add it into other things, but it's not something that always is a sunshining picture for them. Because the way that the gut changes and the way the exchange happens, right? Between the large intestine, small intestine, and processing. And so by obliterating that, right? And you're focusing on carb cycling, proper carb cycling.
Yep.
It's getting that caloric intake down with your Lumen, which nutrition can help you with. And I just do it, right? I haven't gone to nutrition and said, bring me down here because I just do it. I know my mark is on some days it's 300, some days it's 400, 500, and some days it's 800 and 1,000. And what I have found is that on some days when it's 1,000 and I've had homemade pasta with mushrooms, right? As an example, for my meal, I actually lose weight, which goes right back to what Lumen is teaching you about metabolic flexibility. Yeah. You must have carbs, but you need good carbs, right?
Exactly.
But you can't eat them every single day. Like, that is a bonus. But let me tell you, I will usually drop a pound or two after having a meal like that, if I am moving correctly. If I'm not moving, the scale goes up.
I think that's a really good point, what you mentioned about calories. And I think that the class of GLP-1 medications have actually, reminded us that eating, weight management, our body and the way we see food and the way we process food, it's not about counting calories. It's actually completely, and you said it earlier, hormone driven. It's down to our hormones. And for anyone watching who doesn't know what GLP-1 medications are, that it's a hormone. It's a hormone that tells your body to stop eating. Simply, it's telling the brain you're full. And so the calories that you do consume when you are taking GLP, it's incredibly important, the quality of those calories, because you can have, like I said, some days you're having 1,000 calories, but, a sugary soda, a liter of sugary soda that a lot of people, unfortunately, are consuming, that's 1,000 calories, but so is a steak, we've got avocados, olive oil, full of calories, but the right calories. So I think you mentioned a really good point, that Lumen, on a journey where you are also taking GLP-1 medication, I'm going to teach you how to consume the calories that are right for you, that are healthy, and to get in, I think, the muscle mass that you say you've managed to maintain. It's probably down to the fact that you're eating the right amount of protein. Like your Lumen is recommending the protein. And protein is so important, especially if you're taking a medication like GLP-1, because you don't want to lose that muscle, which I think a lot of people are finding they are, right? This is what they don't tell you. It's stopping you eat, like it's telling your body to stop eating, but then you're also on that fine line of depriving your muscles from having this protein that you need to sustain them. So these myths, have you seen that also with your own clients, that they don't really understand the importance of the quality of the calories?
People don't even know what a carbohydrate is. When I teach them that a carbohydrate is sugar, they're like, what? No, it's not. And I'm like, your body registers carbohydrates as sugar. And so a complex carbohydrate is going to go in slowly, and a fast carb, a sugary carb, right? Like chips and pasta, those things are going to go in where your ancient grains are going to go in slower. Your fast carbs are going to go in quick and fast and spike your blood sugar. And your whole goal is to keep your blood sugar stable. And so by following a macro eating plan, you're going to do that, and you can't fake it. You can't pretend. And between Lumen and your GLP-1 that you're on, you cannot fake it. You cannot go and eat caramels and candy as a meal and then go and have some protein, because it's just you're not gonna lose weight. And so I hear people like, yeah, but I'm eating pasta and I love it and it's so good, but I'm not losing any weight. And I'm like, that's because you're not allowing the GLP-1 to go after fat store. Yeah. You have to put yourself in that deprivation mode of eating protein and carbs specific. We want good carbs, so we're looking at lots of vegetables and really good protein. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yes, like you mentioned, that's going back to what you mentioned even earlier, was the carb cycling, because we're all different. And I think Lumen is a good reminder as well on this journey with GLP-1, is that everyone's different. And, some people actually need to eat their carbs in the evening, because otherwise they wake up hungry. Some people need to eat the carbs in the first half of the day, for most people. But also the type of carb you mentioned, pasta, you like your home cooked pasta. And again, it's so funny. Like for me, I can metabolize pasta very quickly. My Lumen showed me that I can go quickly into fat burn a few hours after having pasta. But if I have white rice in my sushi,
same.
I'm like 12 hours to 24 hours carb burn, and I'm like, wow. But then my colleague who uses her Lumen, white rice is fine, but pasta's not. She's studying pasta. So the Lumen, I think, is incredible for that individual to actually understand what carbs give them that energy, but also, help with that metabolic flexibility, like help them sort of metabolize it quickly and then quickly get into those fat stores.
And your pasta versus rice. Those two types of carbohydrates are totally different inside everybody's chemistry. So an A blood type, they can burn a lot of things, but they don't process protein. They got to get protein from different things. If I were to do a vegetarian as an O positive gal, and I was only to go plant-based, it does not work out well for me at all. Not at all.
Are you O positive?
I am O positive. And
I as well.
right? Yeah. So if I go on a chickpea fest, oh my gosh, literally an entire week, I am battling that. And so chickpeas, I could have like a tablespoon of chickpeas and I'm okay. Just as for something to crunch, something to add some goodness to whatever I'm having. But I can eat tofu just fine, but I still need that animal protein.
Wow.
It's great for me. But so going back to, do I have to stay on my GLP when I get to my goal weight? I believe that when we go off and specific to the Lumen, like this is a big plug for this device. If you are using this correctly, it's going to know your habits. It's going to know what got you where you are. All right. So when nutrition then comes back in, okay, we know this about your metabolism. We're going to ease you in, but you have to be extremely strict. You can't just all of a sudden go back to your bad habits, because that's what we do as human beings, right? Like you just cannot do that. And I believe the same with people who are very successful with your gastric bypass, right? When they are successful, it's because they followed all the things to a T. And I believe that when I get there, this device, I will be working really tightly with nutrition to see where we're going to go to keep me in that sweet spot of maintenance. And maintenance, I'm going to tell you, this is another thing that I think nutrition could help us with, is how long do you need to be strict with your maintenance program to maintain for life? That is critical. It's very critical because, it's changing mindset too. You still need to move 15 to 30 minutes after each time you eat, if you can, right? You should be getting movement in every day. And what's your new life? What's your new body needing from you? And where are you at in your age? A post baby mother who's done having her children and moving into whatever next phase, perimenopause, menopause, whatever it is, that's bringing on a whole new gamut. But I believe from my experience personally and the data that if we can keep this sweet spot of maintenance, the hormone levels are going to be maintained. And that is the critical piece. Maintaining the hormones so that they can ride the wave and maintain long-term weight loss and keep you healthy.
And hormone balance, throughout the years, like you mentioned, your hormones as a woman in your 20s are going to look very different in your 30s and 40s and 50s. And I think going back to, the point you made about movement being important, the quality of the macros, all those things that are just become non-negotiable as we're aging. It's again, looking at it from a holistic view, piecing together that puzzle, because, you mentioned you're not doing, high intensity workouts, for example. You're not benefiting from those types of workouts. And I think for a lot of women and men, the Lumen is kind of reminding you and showing you that your metabolism's changing. Again, it's hormone driven. And so too does your lifestyle habits need to change. So a woman in menopause might need to do more yoga or more brisk walks than the 45-minute high intensity workout she did in the gym, but she probably felt great with and maybe was able to lose weight, incorporating that in her week. But today, Lumen, for anyone who's like watching and doesn't have a Lumen, your Lumen will show that you're in physiological stress, whether it's because of emotional stress or overtraining or doing the wrong type of workouts, by showing you higher Lumen levels when you're really expecting fat burn levels. So it can also show you when you're in that stress response, and we don't want that. But again, it just goes back to that whole sort of discussion and all the great points you mentioned, Sharon, like today, like it's hormones. It's taking care of yourself, showing yourself some self-care and reminding yourself that, you've got to look and piece together all those little those dots, connect them all together using devices like Lumen. We've got all those tools now to give us that data in real time to make those informed decisions around what is actually working for us. Like we mentioned, rice for us, maybe it's because we're O positive, I don't know, is not a carb we really should be eating too often.
No.
Have to maybe better. But so yeah, just wow. So finally, I think just a final message for anyone who is considering going on a GLP medication or thinking about getting a Lumen or getting both, what sort of top 3 tips could you give them that you've learned on your journey this past 11 months using both? What are the top 3? And I think we've mentioned them today, but just as like as a summary, what are the top 3 things you want them to take away with from this talk?
Oh, thank you. 1, water consumption is huge. You have to drink your water and being hydrated. Water consumption is water consumption, but you really need to be focusing on the right minerals, the balance of that, because then your cells get the information that they need to be able to transport nutrients where they need to go. And when your body is saturated with in a hydrated kind of atmosphere, your Lumen will show you because you're going to burn more fat. You're going to find yourself. I find myself in fat burn more when I'm keeping those minerals up, for me specifically. Now, maybe that's where my hormone levels are and my experiences, my age and all of those things. I don't know, but I don't know any of my clients who are really hydrated, cutting out coffee and black tea and any caffeine products, right? When they cut that out, by the way, those are really restricted in many of our gastric bypass people, just as a side note. But when we cut that out and we're really hydrating and focusing on that, not giving any extra, exactly, like cheers, right?
Just thinking about it.
And so that really helps the body transport nutrients and information, so that then you're going to see it in your Lumen recordings.
That's a good point. That's overlooked so often.
Yeah, for sure. And then just become really stealthy in your consumption, like really being honed in on tracking your food and your quality of food. And I'm a busy woman, so I have to get a good protein bar and hunting for a good protein bar, because if I'm on the go, if I go too long, man, I'll tell you, I will shoot up to a 3 and a 4. I don't go to a 5 anymore, but I will go to a 3 and a 4. And when my body's like, you need more protein, like you also need to slow down, but I need protein and I need vegetables. My Lumen shows me that. And it shows me when my stress levels are high. So getting good at tracking and being diligent about using your app and reporting. Ask questions of nutrition, like, hey, I'm struggling with this. Stick to that. So point number 1, hydration. Point number 2, being very, very diligent about tracking on your app. And 3, really honing in on self-care and understanding why you eat what you eat. Because so often, like for me, it's so easy to just pop right back into, I can just fast longer. But my Lumen's like, oh, no, you can't. Actually, you've gone over the edge, right? Like I could be 85% fat burn. I've never once gotten to higher, like never once in my almost year have I been 100%. It is okay. But when you're competitive, like you're like, I can just make it happen. And it's not going to just happen, but when you're competitive in nature, you want to see how far you can push your body. And if that's your nature, and if you're the lazy weight loss, like, I could just never walk again or never exercise and just, eat exactly what I'm told and lose the weight. Okay. That's not going to work for you either.
No.
So that self-care piece and that real mental process of, because many of us are, I'm a depriver, but many people are emotional eaters.
Yeah.
And so what can you do in place of emotional eating? Journal your feelings, because if not, you're going to eat them. And feelings buried alive never, ever, ever die.
Gosh,
they don't.
Tracking, water. I mean, those are great points. Those are great reminders. This is honestly, I think there's gonna be a lot of people taking away a lot of like new information from this. And I think actually we've opened up a topic that people are gonna now want to like start asking more questions about this and start to
Yeah.
go, actually, okay, or ask questions about their body, about their health, and biohack the metabolism towards it. But it's an interesting new field, and I'm excited to see where it's going to take us. You know, it's
Right.
still very new, still lack of data out there and research. You know, exploding field of biohacking tools that are going to help us get to that point where we really understand what's going on. But this has been awesome, Sharon.
Yeah. Yeah. The one thing that I would say at the very, very end of this too is there are a lot of people who are like, I don't want a synthetic or a derived chemical like GLP-1. Are there natural things? And there are, but I'm going to tell you the rules still apply. The
Yeah.
caloric intake needs to come down. All the rules are the same. If your caloric intake comes down, you need water consumption. You need to track. You need to keep that self-care piece, that understanding of who you are, how you think about food, your relationship to food. All those things still matter if you're using mulberry root extract and the other items we know are going to slow metabolism down to keep blood sugar stable. The same rules apply.
Yeah, exactly. It's all down to your metabolism. It's all down to your
Absolutely.
hormones, and yeah, and I think that's actually a good point before we end, is that, you know, not everyone wants to get on these GLP-1 medications, and some people shouldn't be on them at all.
Right.
But basically, the rules, like you said, apply to everyone. It just, you know, like for example, the water intake. I mean, it's just we're all human beings. We all need the basics to keep us healthy, including getting just enough steps. And that's also a really good reminder that it can just be very simple. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you know, improving your metabolism, actually, when you stay accountable and you've got a tool that helps you track, it's actually very simple. You don't need to overcomplicate things. But this was absolutely amazing, Sharon. Thank you so
I'm
much for
happy
this.
to. Yeah, thank you for having me. It was great. I love your work.
I love yours too. Keep up the good work.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.